Cool. I hope everyone's back. But yeah, we're gonna start um, the speaking engagement now. So I can take a little bit of time just introducing Lakota. Yeah, so me and another ESLP organizer got the pleasure of meeting with Lakota yesterday in a more intimate setting. And I just have to say that she's a truly warm and bright soul, and just everything that she says is comes from the heart and has such pure intent. And yeah, just with that, yeah, let's just jump into it. I'm really excited. Y'all are probably really excited. Yeah, let's get into it. And I'm going to start off by showing this video that shows a major part of Lakota's story. Let's see. Can y'all hear and see this okay?
This country is built on the bones of our ancestors. We have our culture, we have our way of life, we have our language. What we're trying to do is retain it. Retain our right as a people to be Indian.
It was truly an empowering, free time. Watching the women is amazing how they handled everything. Protecting our people and our children's future and fighting, being warriors in that way.
The press, they just automatically gravitated to the men. And who really knew what was going on and who was really running the show were the women.
We were a movement of families.
Being the daughter of Madonna, she definitely had a reputation of being strong. And when someone went to her for help, she did what she had to do to make a difference.
However, we get the job done, whatever it takes.
Okay, I'm here. Hi, everybody. I hope everyone had a little break there and maybe you got some water. I hope that some of you got some water. My name is Lakota Harden Tashina Skawi Imachiapi, and I am really honored to be able to spend this little bit of time with you. I think when I was talking to Maddie and Rachel, one of the things that I mentioned is that I've been waiting for this time. I'm going to be 64 years old in 2 years, and I have some pictures that I might show later, but since I was a little girl, I was 7 years old and my great grandmother was 97. And this was in the 1960, I don't know, 62 maybe or something. And she talked about a time, and I'll go into it more later, but this is that time. And so for me, I'm really excited to be here with you all. And what I want to do right now was, if you went and got some water, hopefully everybody did. And if you didn't get some, if you have your water bottle, oh, I always forget these virtual things. Always, if you have your water bottle or your glass, I have my Raiders Cup glass of water. Grab that right now, because the way I would like to start is to remind us that this is your first class. So I even feel more honored, because when I realized that as I was listening, as I was eavesdropping just now, I was thinking of all of you, and because the way I was raised, and when we come together, anytime we come together, there's a joke about Indian time because the Indians or us Native people get there when we get there, right? And we've never really, at least when I was younger, the old people and people from the past before they were truly colonized, um, still went by Indian time. And it's like when we get started, we get started when everyone's ready, right? And so the reason I'm bringing that up is we also would start any greeting or any time together with an honoring of our ancestors, with an honoring of those who came before us. So there's one thing I usually do, but this is a new thing because it's so valuable to us right now. I want you to take your water, and I'm going to tell you a story. And while I'm telling you this story, I want you to make it your own as you look at your water, as you take some time to acknowledge this sacred water. In our old days, we didn't have running water. When we would, for me, I'm from the plains. I'm a Lakota, and I'm coming to you from Tlingit in Alaska. And there's more to that story of why I'm here instead of on the plains. That movie that you just saw is of my family. We're from South Dakota, and I was raised in the movement. But in the old days, what I remember my great grandmother telling me was that when we lived in teepees, they were mobile homes. You could fold them up and use the poles and move over terrain. It was before we had wheels, and it went over the terrain really well. So everything we used, everything we had multi-purposes. And so in the morning, the reason we followed the buffalo was, of course, they were the source of everything: our food, our clothing, our shelter, our tools, our medicines, all of that. So they would use the bladders of the buffalo and go. And in the morning, whoever went, it was usually one of the young women or a young man, but they would go to the creek because the buffalo knew where the water was. The plains, if you've ever been in the Midwest, it looks flat, but there's these gullies where the rivers were, the creeks were. And so we would follow the buffalo because they knew where the water was. And so if we followed them, we'd find the water. So the mother or whoever would go out with the buffalo bladders that were cleaned and used for water bottles, water bags, and go and gather the water. But we had a relationship with the water. So we would offer, our sage or our song. We had a song for everything. So we'd sing a water song or even just our words. But the acknowledgement of your water, just acknowledging that it's a spirit, that it has life, it's alive, it comes from the earth. And we would say it's the veins of our Mother Earth, right? So she would go to the river and she would talk to the water and offer that song, make her offering and thank the water for giving us life, for nurturing us, because we could not live without it. And she would tell, the water and say, my grandmother's hip hurts, or my father's worried about, this or that, and would just kind of make that relationship and talk to the water, and then bring it back. And when she came back, the family would circle up around the water, and everybody, it was a sacred act. Everybody would take their drink of water and give thanks to that water. And so all my life, when I turn on that faucet in the morning, no matter which faucet it is, if it's the shower or if it's to take a drink, usually I just have a water bottle by my bed and I just roll over and take a drink right away. But I always say thank you. And you create that relationship with the water and appreciate it so that we'll always have it. And we're in a time in our lifetime in the world, in society, where water is very scarce. So let's all together right now just take some time to really just focus and say thank you to this water. And this water was also the medicine and the liquid that your parents and your grandparents and your great grandparents and on um, drank. When you stand in the ocean, you put your feet in the ocean, that's the same ocean water that travels all over the world and connects us all that way. So let's just take a moment to take a drink of water and ask it for healing. If something's bothering you, if you feel crappy about something, if you have parts of your body that hurt, or if you're concerned about somebody, or if you have grief, if you've lost somebody to COVID, or lost somebody to jail, or lost somebody to drugs, or whatever it might be, distance, ask for healing for that, and that it will be made good again, that it will somehow be, you can move forward and feel good, So let's just take a drink of water and do that right now. Pilamia, thank you. It's a good habit to get into because we know that water, it's funny because I've lived in my lifetime where I've been taught things. I lived biculturally, and part of my life, my mother wanted me to get a formal education and go to school and go to college and all this. So she made sure I did that. But at the same time, we had our people, our medicine people. And would I be able to share screen actually? I have this picture. Oh no, I can't. Okay. Well, anyway, there's my great grandmother was 97, like I said, and my great grandmother, who was in her 70s, would come and get me on the weekends when I was in boarding school. And I won't go into boarding school because it's pretty tragic and horrific. And it was one of the ways that our people were really damaged when we were stolen from our families and put in these schools. This Christianity was used to colonize us. But so I was at this really horrific school, and it was like little concentration camps for kids. It was pretty bad with a lot of abuse. But my great grandmother would come and get me on weekends, and I would get to spend time with her and my great grandmother, who was alive pre-contact. So she would tell me stories, and she would talk about this place that she lived previous to the invasion and how we lived on the plains. And it was such an amazing place. And so we she would talk about it, and I was in this terrible school, right? Because we have formal education, and it was a Catholic boarding school. And she would tell me how everybody was cared for, how everybody was taken care of, and it was pretty magical that way. And so she would tell me about this place, and I'd say, "Oh, let's go there. I want to go there," instead of where I was, right? And okay, I'm gonna share screen because they just gave me the capability to do so. Because this is my great grandmother, and what I learned too about her was that I learned what a true Christian is. I learned that this was oops, I went the wrong direction. Can you guys see what I'm seeing? Can someone tell me?
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's me and my great grandmother, and this was back in like 62 or 63, something like that. I was 7 years old, and it's ironic because I also have on these patent leather shiny shoes, red shoes, right? And look at me, I'm in jeans and kind of looking like a 7-year-old kid who plays outside. But they would talk about how it was for me, and so I had that in my mind and she would say to me, her mother, not this is Grandma Twinklestar, but her mother was really old, and she would say, "We'll get there, Takoja, we'll get back to that one day." This is a bunch of pictures of my family, my mother right here, who raised me, and then her sister, and there was another sister, but we all were raised, we didn't really these are my cousins, these two girls in front of me, this is me right here, but we were all sisters. These were all my sisters and brothers. And that's how we were raised. This is a picture of us here in Sitka when Standing Rock was happening. Sitkans stand with Standing Rock, and I'm sure a lot of you might have heard of what happened in Standing Rock in 2016. And the fight to protect water. This is a picture of my Uncle Russ, who wrote a book, Where White Men Fear to Tread. And it's the autobiography, but it's also about our childhood. So that's why I tend to mention it, because um, this is me when I was a young mother and my daughter, and we had her naming ceremony. This was when I was a dancer. I was a part of Dance Brigade in the Bay Area. So at the age of 36, we did a show in 1992 called Living on the Edge of the World, Goodbye Columbus. And this was heavier than parachute material, but it was pretty amazing dance about liberation and about survival. This is my uncle on the res. This is what the plains looks like. They moved us all over the place, but we followed the buffalo and we cooked outdoors. It's just kind of an example of, you know, the rustic life that we had. This is my mother. Willie Nelson is part Native and he's always been supportive. This is her and her outfit, her with a grandchild. And the four sisters, we called them the Four Winds because they raised all of us together. It was a pretty powerful time. This is my family, a blended family. My mother brought my brother and I up to Alaska and ended up marrying this Tlingit man, and you know that this is our family. This is when I was at right before I went to boarding school. That's me with my uncles and my aunts, my mother right here. So I'm basically what I'm showing you is that I lived in two different worlds, and um, for all my life. And these guys were my dads, and these were my mothers. So that was kind of the traditional way. This is later on in 1993, I think. That's Santana and just our community in Oakland. And that's me. We sang with him at the Ben and Jerry's music festival, and we sang with him at the BAMIs, which was the Bay Area Music Awards. These are the three sisters. My mother was the oldest, and then Madonna and Mabel Ann, who were featured in that movie Warrior Woman that you just saw the preview to. And of course, this was at my uncle's funeral when he passed in 2012. It was just something. These are the Four Winds again right here at a meeting on the reservation. And this, I wanted to end with this because this is a kuspuk. And what that means is that's a huge one. It's like 11 feet tall, but it's got pictures painted of the missing and murdered Indigenous women. And this just happened here in Sitka not too long ago. So I just wanted to share that with you because that kuspuk is what is the Arctic tribes, the indigenous people from the Arctic make those. And this one is a huge one. It's got the pictures of the women and it was a tribute and they brought it here. So for Women's History Month, we did some missing and murdered indigenous women sharing. Anyway, so that's just a little bit about my life and where I come from, and the fact that I was raised with that knowledge, you know, because we were colonized away from our different traditional ways, and we were terrorized into accepting the contemporary ways of the invaders, which now is called America, right? So we're older than America, and we're still here. And there was so much that was done for us to disappear or to be colonized out of our way of being, and it didn't work. Luckily, there's a lot of us still alive. And now with people with the land acknowledgements, you know, I used to travel and do these speeches and workshops around the country. And I would always ask, as soon as I went to wherever I was on Turtle Island, I would say, who here is originally from this land? And 98% of the time, there wasn't anybody from there, you know, from that tribe that was lived on that land. And, but I would want to acknowledge that. And then if there was, I would ask them to stand. And that's what I would have done with you all if you were indigenous to your land and then indigenous to this Turtle Island, ask you to stand and say that I am proud of you, that you've made it, you've survived genocide, no matter what we've been through, because it's been a lot of healing that needs to happen from the fact that we did survive. We weren't supposed to, we weren't meant to, and we have. And part of the reason I always attribute that to two things, and it's completely the fact that we have been a relative to the environment and that way of being and that way of thinking. So when I look, oh wait, now let me stop this and see if I can show you. I'm going to turn off my virtual background because as I sit here at home, I'm at home today, and I am with you. I am watching the snow. Wait, now, I'm not that good at this. Can you see it? Oh, I guess you can't really see it, but it's really snowing right now. And all these trees that are outside my window are my relatives, you know? And it's funny because I'm actually in a housing unit that's low income, and we live in Alaska. I live in Alaska where everything's really expensive. And I would drive over here when I lived somewhere else. I was renting a room. I would drive over here and I would park in the parking area. And it's just so happened it was right in front of this apartment. And I would have my lunch and I would take a piece of whatever I was eating, you know, if it was a sandwich or something else, an onion ring, you know, and just set it out on my dash. And I would get out and I would talk to these trees and say, I would love to live with you. I would love to live here, you know. And within the year, I was on the list and they said, we have an apartment available. And it was this apartment. So these trees helped me get this apartment, you know. And so I thank them. I wake up and I open my screen every day and go out on this little balcony and I say, good morning. And when it was really windy a couple of weeks, last month, we had some really hard rainstorms that were, the wind was so strong. And these tall trees, you know, that are just up into the sky were waving all over. And I kept going out there and just acknowledging that they're going through this. And I would go out there and I would notice some of the smaller, skinnier trees are broken. So I would sing to them and I would say, I'm sorry you lost some of your relatives, you know, because some of the trees are now laying on the ground and or laying against because they're all so close together. So the reason I'm telling you this is I want us to remember what we all know. Wherever we come from around the world, we all had a relationship. We all had medicine. We all saw our surroundings as relatives. If you look at any culture and you look at back centuries ago, whatever furs were being worn, whatever adornments like these dentillion shells, you could tell who people were by what they wore. And we didn't just slap anything on and just call it pretty. Everything had meaning, everything had a purpose. Even with, you know, when you think about the red dot on, you know, there's a whole meaning that you earn to have that on your head. The tattoos that people had on their faces, the Maori women, you know, you don't just get them because you feel like it. Everything had a sacred meaning and a sacred purpose. And when we interact with them, we would thank them, ask them. I mean, a young man here, he took me out fishing, you know, and I remember this. And as soon as he would catch a fish, he would yell, say a phrase and Tlingit. And he was saying, thank you for giving your life so my family could eat, you know, thank you for feeding my people. And even picking berries or any of those things of making that relationship. And for years, you know, I didn't really go and just blatantly start telling this because most people would think we were crazy, you know, would think that we're that I'm talking about something unusual. And when children, little children have imaginary friends or they can see them, they can see the spirit world, they can, you know, see that. And we know that. And that's part of why in our tribes, if you think of Native people's names and in their languages, it translates to the trees, you know, maybe standing tall woman or in my case, white shawl woman. And, you know, we got these names and it had to do with our walk in life, you know. So for me, Tashina Skawi in my language means white shawl woman. And when I got it as a young woman, went through my own womanhood ceremony, I was so nervous in the ceremony that I was afraid to say, well, why did I get that name? You know, I just said, Wopila, Pilamia, thank you, white shawl woman, Tashina Skawi. And it wasn't until that picture, remember the one I showed you where I'm dancing, I realized in that moment, because my mother had passed in 91, and this show was Living on the Edge of the World, Goodbye Columbus, in 92, when the whole world, was focusing on 500 years of America's birthday, right? And for us, it was like 500 years of resistance. And so we had the show, and it was multicultural women's dance company. And I really missed my mother. And when I was a kid growing up, I wanted to be a dancer, and the only thing you could see was on TV. And I would be in front of the TV wanting to dance. And I lived in a town where we didn't have a lot of things, this town. And so she had passed away. And I remember our first performance, and I had that huge outfit on with these bamboo poles inside of it. And I was kneeling down, and I was ready, and I was terrified. I just like, what was I thinking? Your heart's beating. Any of you, when you go on, right, if you're going to speak or you're going to dance or you start having those nerves. Well, I was doing that, and all of a sudden I heard my mother's voice say, you did it, because I'd wanted to be a dancer my whole life. And here I was, overweight, 36, and I was a dancer, and I went on tour, and it was amazing. So our relationship, our DNA, John Trudell, these names that I say too, if you look them up on YouTube or anywhere, he had music, and he talked about our DNA was descendants and ancestors. And I like that because it's true. Anytime when I first went to UC Berkeley, I went there and I felt lost because of all the homeless, because of the city. I wasn't used to that kind of urban environment. And I remember finding inside UC Berkeley's campus, there was some trees and a little creek that ran through. And I went there and I was crying, and I was like, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have come here. I just want to go home. And I had my kids with my sister Marcy, the one that's in the video, and she was holding my kids, with like our moms did. We all stayed with each other until I got established in Berkeley, and those trees right there in that moment when I was crying and wishing for them, missing my family, those trees reminded me that I was never alone, that they were with me. And I was thinking, I made a mistake. I did this wrong. What was I thinking? And they said, silly girl, you did not do this. You're always in the morning when you drink your water, when you make your offerings, you're asking for protection, you're asking for direction every morning, right? And and so we gave it to you, and we brought you here. We brought you here to UC Berkeley. We worked it out that you got here, which was a great accomplishment, right? And you have to trust us, is what they said. So if we do the right thing, if we make our offerings, if we create that relationship, that energy that we have when we do this, and you can feel the energy in your hands, and you put your hand up, and you let, a stereotype that you might know when they say, why, Peter Pan, where this is, why do the Indians say how, right? And people made it look like we were stupid and we were asking how, and in my language, it's actually a greeting. And the energy that we share, we had awareness of that. So when you raised your hand, your energy connected with the person you were meeting, right? Just like the Maori, it looks like they're putting their noses together when actually they're putting their third eye together and sharing that energy with each other, saying that, we come together in peace, we come together in love, right? So those are some of the things about the environment that I think is important, because scientists will tell you all kinds of things, and they're proving, I forgot the guy's name that did the test on the water and tested different waters from different places, and it showed the cellular makeup of the water crystals and what they look like. And then if they did something with it, they all look different, right? Just like snowflakes look different. And so, oh yeah, Masaru Emoto. And so science proves what we've known. you know, that this water is alive and it's looking at me right now and telling me maybe I should talk about something different. But yeah, so I'm not, time goes by really fast. I just want to check in with people if how much time I have left, because we do want to have time for Q&A, and I don't want to take too long. I'm also putting in the chat just some things on your own that you can copy and paste. There's some websites of kind of current issues. The warriorwoman.org one is for the film, of course, and an Indian Collective is kind of a land back explanation of what is happening as far as activism right now with no DAPO. You know, we're trying to fight today, right now. There's an action to fight Line 3 to protect the water, because all of these oil pipelines are going through what's last remaining of our water sources, clean water sources. And then just Indigenous Environmental Network, International Indian Treaty Council, just some things that I have been a part of in most of my life, being an active person. So that's what I wanted to say about that. And I think I will go ahead and open it up for questions, because that would be the easiest, or that would be the most beneficial to you, to see what you're wanting and what you're thinking in your time here with me, that's specific to your studies and why you took this class. So can we do that now, Maddie?
Yeah, so feel free to just unmute yourself and ask any question, or you can drop them in the chat, and we can get someone to read those out for us.
Oh, you know what I was gonna do? Remember? Okay, wait, before we do that, what I wanted to do is that I gave you a lot of information. I gave you a lot to think about. Maybe you already knew this. Maybe you're thinking, I knew all that, you know, or maybe you didn't. But I want to just take a few minutes, like 3 minutes, to have you just ingest that and think about your ancestors. Think about who raised you. You know, when you look in the mirror and you say, oh, my nose is too big, or this is too that, right? Hardly anybody says, dang, you're so beautiful, right? Maybe some people do that, but a lot of people don't, right? And we tend to criticize our thighs or our butt or our whatever. We criticize our bodies. In reality, every part of us comes from one of your ancestors. And your ancestors went through everything. A lot of them went through giving up their languages, giving up their homelands, giving up their names even. You know, I think about that, what it would be like to have to give up your family name so that you can fit in. So you cut it in half so it fits in more with the melting pot or whatever this, you know. But everyone went through a lot of harsh immigration oppression, you know, to get here. So no matter where we come from, they went through a lot and they survived it with their intelligence, bravery, courage, good decision making, because a lot of people didn't make it. So we are the descendants. We are the ones who came from strong and amazing people, no matter who they were. So during this next few minutes, I just want you to thank them. I want you to just connect with them and thank them. And also, what do you want to pass on to your descendants? And they're probably not born yet, but our grandparents thought about us before we were born. You know, we want to think about our descendants. What world do we want to pass on to them? Do we want to make sure they have clean water and clean air? So I want you to just take some time to think that, or write something down. Well, this is what I'm going to play, this little video here that just reminds us right now we are fighting for the herring, to protect the herring in our community. And so I want you to think about that as we play this video, and just take some time to reflect, check in with yourself. this is what we're dealing with up here right now, because the herring isn't being given a chance to live or to grow to adulthood. And the industries are just gouging the oceans, and the herring feeds everything. So I just wanted us to take some breaths right now. Just take some deep breath on your own. And I want to talk about oxygen. I told the story to Rachel and Maddie yesterday about, we just take air for granted. And we fight for clean air and everything, but we don't think of air as a spirit. And I did. I had a bad accident and I hurt my legs, and there was a while I was on crutches, and it took me a long time to recuperate and learn to walk again. And there was doctors talking about doing knee replacements or such, and I have not had any of that. Instead, I had just started doing yoga because I couldn't walk anymore. I couldn't do certain things. So I started doing yoga, and I started learning about in meditation when we breathe and how the breath is powerful. And it reminded me of my own teachings, indigenous teachings about air. It's one of the four sacred elements. And so I started, when I would breathe, I would inhale the air and send it to my knees, like physically just picture it into my knees, and then exhale. And I kept doing that, and I'm walking and hiking and doing a ton of things that they didn't expect me to do because I have good knees. I mean, and they hurt sometimes, so I have to remind myself and keep breathing and keep stretching and talking to the air again and making that offering. So oxygen also is your ally, is your relative, is a part of who we are. And we just, spend so much time there. There was a cartoon that I saw in the papers. We don't do this stuff anymore, but it was called Family Circus, and it was about this one cartoon that would show all these kids. Does anyone know Family Circus? And anyway, it was this little boy and this little girl, and they were walking and talking to the flowers, and the flowers are saying to each other, "Oh, I just love old people and little people because they talk to us." And I always remember that, because it's like, well, good, I'm not alone, right? We can make that relationship, and that's how we are going to survive, and not let fear be the thing that determines why we do what we do, but to let love and hope and relationships, building tioshpae or creating relationships, be the reason why we survive, why we're doing what we do. And the more we let go and allow that to happen, it helps us to heal. So I'll say that much, and not let fear be the thing that determines why we do what we do, but to let love and hope and relationships, building tioshpae or creating relationships, be the reason why we survive, why we're doing what we do. And the more we let go and allow that to happen, it helps us to heal. So I'll say that much, and then Maddie or somebody, would you want to read the questions, or anybody who wants to unmute and ask?
I have a question. First off, thank you so much, Lakota. That was thank you for sharing your family and your life to us. That was beautiful. I was curious if you could go into more depth about your naming ceremony. Just when I was listening to that, I kind of thought of my own experience as a Jew and getting my Hebrew name, and kind of how that means to me, and what your name might mean to you, and how you came to be the woman of the white shawl.
Thank you for that question, Noah, and I appreciate your attention to tradition as well. We joke a little bit. I just want to say, when I was in the Bay Area, I have family, and in Wounded Knee in 73, the people who came, the lawyers that came to help us were Jewish. You know, it was like these were the people who stepped up and stood up for us so that we wouldn't all get locked up, right? And so our relationships have always been really strong. And then people would tease me about us being the lost tribe. You know, that's that theory, right? That we got lost and came over here to Turtle Island. But yeah, the naming ceremony for me, everyone has it a different way. Each, you know, all the different nations. It's like Europe is France and England and Denmark, you know, they're different cultures and different people. Same with here. So what West Coast tribes do is different than Plains tribes, is different than Pacific Northwest, you know. And so for me, all I can speak about is my own naming ceremony. But for me as a young woman, I when we go through the rites of passage, that was one of the times that you get acknowledged. And I went through that ceremony. And then on my own, what we call the Hamblechia, the Vision Quest, people would actually actively prepare for a year and then go, and that's something that mainstream culture knows a little bit about, where they would go and pray alone in the wilderness for 4 days and 4 nights. And so when we did that, when I did that, some things happened I would like to share someday. Where I, you know, that's why I know things are, you know, the water saved me once, where I was falling off of a raft while we were whitewater rafting, and the water just lifted us up and moved us over. And it wasn't the current, it was different from the current. And I thought it saved us. I've had times when the earth, where all of a sudden I'm thrown forward for no reason, but, you know, that push, and all of a sudden something fell right where I was right before that, you know, that relationship. So when I went on my own womanhood ceremony, or my own ceremony, when we came together, and our medicine people, you know, have that, and it's not shaman school, it's not, you know, it's centuries old teachings. And then when I was given that name, like I said, I went through that. I went without food and water and prayed, and when I was done, they came and got me, and then we went back down into our own sweat lodge, which is a ceremony that we have. And in there was able to get the interpretation and was given that name. And so for me, I didn't, like I said, I didn't ask. I wasn't sure what it meant, but I was curious, you know. And I had found out that two things: the White Shawl Society were the peacemakers. And what that means is there were women that were in the community. So say we're in a community, right, where you're all in campus or whatever. I mean, let's pretend that we're on campus. And in that community, we have meetings, and nowadays we elect people and we choose people, right? Well, we would choose our leaders based on what they did. You know, well, I'm going to follow him because he's good to his, you know, he's humble, or he's whatever reasons we choose, by their actions, by the way they treat their family, by the way they treat their mother, all that. And the White Shawl Society were women that nobody knew who they were, because we could go and lobby somebody, right? If you know who's the president of the student council, or the president of whatever club, or whoever has the purse strings of, you go and you lobby them, right? And you tell them your story and you want to convince them. And that's what politicians do to us, right? Well, the White Shawl Society were unknown, so you didn't know who they were. And it's just like our creation story in Lakota culture, the creation story, the creator made all of these things and then rested in a rock. So when we have value and honor the rock, the stone. In fact, there's a Frank Wallen, W-A-L-N. Frank Wallen is a rapper that you can find on YouTube or on music. He has a song called My Stone, and it's the connection of the creator that created all things and is in the stone. So when we heat the stones for the sweat lodge and put them in, you see their faces, you see your ancestors in these stones. And my mother speaking in names, as Iaskawi, it means white rocks woman. And when those stones burn really hot, I remember when she got the name and she was explaining it, that they turn white, you pour water on them, they turn white. And I remember her telling me this, and she passed away when I was younger. So going into the sweat lodge, there's those white rocks, there's my mother. So for me, that's another way to relate to her, besides the Beatles music, but that's another story for another time. But the white shawl women were, nobody knew who they were, so they couldn't lobby them. So that when they met, they went by what they saw, how people were acting and reacting, so that was a good way of leadership, because it's not about yourself, it's about the community itself. So I learned that. And then that whole incident of when I was dancing, I realized I'm wearing a white shawl, and here I am dancing, because the picture that I showed you, there were fringes on it. So it was like a large shawl. And with the shawl itself, going back to what I was saying about everything we wear has meaning, the shawl itself came from the plains, from our culture, and the fringes represented the grasses of the earth. So when we put on a shawl, it's the earth protecting us. And that's why you'll see a lot of indigenous people will have a robe or something on that represents the earth mother, right? And me, that's why I have, oh, you can't see it with my background. I have this on, it's like a shawl, but it has the Pacific Northwest, the Tlingit designs on it, because I'm in Tlingit territory, on Tlingit Ani. So wearing this to help me be with you, I'm not alone. My grandmother, Earth, is with me by putting the shawl around me. Same with Noah's culture, right? Everything they wear has a meaning and has a reason and a purpose to help us on our path, so that we are paying honor to our ancestors and we are paying honor to our descendants, because they're kind of one and the same. We're all connected all the way through. So I hope that answers or says a little bit more, but you earn your name. And, like I said, I didn't ask what it was for, but I've spent, the last 40 some years, 45 years since I got that name, doing diversity trainings and decolonization work and healing workshops, for people, because we've all been damaged one way or another. That cycle of oppression has affected all of us in the way that this place was colonized. Nobody had an option or a choice. That division was put there before us. None of us wanted it. And we've had to learn how to live with it based on our skin color, or our gender, or, any of those things. And it wasn't our choice. And we got misinformation about each other. We got misinformation about ourselves, the internalized oppression. So I've spent a lifetime doing that. And that's what the White Shawl Society did. They tried to help heal and try to help men and help people live in a peaceful way, in a way that fit for everybody. So that's what I figured out about that name. But again, I want to go back to it being earned. People think they can just grab a name and say, oh, I decide to be this. But maybe in Noah's culture and other cultures, I know that people choose a name for you. And it's based on either one of your ancestors, somebody who was very noble or very helpful, or these good attributes. And then they pass that name on to you, so that you carry on those attributes of who they were. And when you have that name, when my son was named Feather Necklace, my grandmother tried to talk to him and she started to cry, because that name was actually cut in half. And she went by Feather all her life. So to get back the necklace part. And again, that book, Where White Men Fear to Tread, my uncle talks about the whole thing. And my son, because he was raised by a single mother and I was raised by a single mother, it's like this culture honors the man's last name. So my son wanted to honor his great grandmother's last name, because it was a line of women, a matriarchal society. And So they all have meaning, and they're earned. Next question.
Yeah, we have a couple messages of gratitude for sharing your experiences in your life with us in the chat. And then I can read this question from Sonia, asking, are you involved with any co-management projects between Indigenous people and U.S. forestry agencies, or educating forestry agencies about Indigenous stewardship practices?
Well, I'm not personally, but I know that that is happening in different places. Here on where I'm at right now, we have a decolonization group where we try to include everybody, and we meet. In fact, we're meeting tonight. And everybody is, there's this book by Annalise Singh. Again, I have a virtual background, the Racial Healing Handbook, that people, the allies in our, it doesn't show, the allies in our community decided to take it on themselves and read the book. So that doesn't quite answer what you're saying about that stewardship, but it should be. And actually, the Park Service up here in Alaska did do a cooperative exchange and with the Sitka tribe of Alaska, and it was a great big deal. It was an honor, so it was shared. And then I don't know what happened, but it ended. And I don't know the details about that, but I think that's what needs to happen. And I think that everybody can be an ally. Everybody can make a relationship and honor those ancestors that were here. But anyway, this is the Racial Healing Handbook by Annalise Singh. And a lot of this stuff I've learned before, but there were some things in here that were helpful to me to be able to help move forward in the work that we do, especially when it comes to oppression and how to do that. Some of the history, I have another aunt, Laneta Warjack, who wrote this book, Native Resistance, and it's kind of a history of what happened at Alcatraz. She was a student at San Francisco State University, I think, in the 60s when they took over Alcatraz in the Bay Area. So Native Resistance by Dr. Laneta Warjack. So I think it's time. I think that, city councils, I just got on the city council for the human needs and health, because they are actually making a push towards having more Indigenous people involved in representation. What's hard about that is it's like, oh, you can come and sit at our table. And if you look at least my tribe, we didn't have tables. I use that as an example. It's like we didn't have tables. We sat on the ground. We sat on the earth. So anyway, there's ways that we need to decolonize our minds to really just release and let go and start seeing what comes. And if we trust ourselves, if we take care of our bodies, we meditate, we do whatever it is, walk through the woods. When I was going through a horrific time, personally, emotionally, as a woman, there was this one tree on my way home, and I would pull over there and I would just wrap myself around that tree and cry and ask that tree to help me with its strength. And I got through it, Same with the moon. I would look at the moon and say, what did you do when your heart was broken? How did you feel? Make those relationships, and your ancestors, your wisdom that you were born with that is passed on to you will come to the surface. Put down your phone, put down some of those things and just spend some quiet time. And writing is one of the best ways to have access to their voice. Make it up. And I guess we're almost out of time, right?